Hello BookTube, my name's Daniel, welcome back to my channel, Guilty Feet. I've got no rhythm, and today I'll give a little quick catch up on this week and then some of the books I'm reading, and I've got some video of my time at the spa, and I'll talk to you a little bit about what that was like, the holiday I've just come back from, which is why I'm this rather nutty shade of mahogany, because I fell asleep in the sun. And it wasn't so scorching hot like I've been there in the summer, and we're up a mountain, so it's kind of, the air is nice and clear, but when it was sunny, it was sunny. I'll tell you a little bit about that. This week in book news, we finished the Tournament of Books. I spoke about the tournament on a video a few weeks ago, and it's been running over the last couple of weeks, and the winner of this year's Rooster, spoiler alert, was Interior Chinatown by Charles Yu, I believe, which in the final beat out Britt Bennett's The Vanishing Half to become the Tournament of Books winner for 2021. I've got Interior Chinatown is one of the books waiting for me in London. Still haven't made it there. Still planning to go in a couple of weeks. We'll see. And some of the other books that did very well. Piranesi, I think, made it through to the semi-finals. And then a couple of other books got knocked out in earlier rounds. But Interior Chinatown, unusually for the tournament, won every single battle it came up against. Every book it went up against. It impressed the judges enough to beat all comers, which makes me more excited to read it. If you want to go back and read the judgments each day, I highly recommend to go if you just search for Tournament of Books, you'll find the link. I'll put it down below. You can go back and look over the last 2 weeks of daily judgments, each book going up against another and progressing, and then the whole complicated notion of the zombie round, where books that were already beaten get to come back again and compete. And it's quite arcane, but every day is a joy reading the judgments and then reading the comments underneath. So my week, since I last spoke to you, we had Seder night, so we were with friends. We had all our family staying for the weekend, and then we went to friends on Saturday evening for the first night of Passover. We had a great, really lovely evening, and it was nice to be in a big, long table. There were about 22 people all together in the same room, so that was something we hadn't done for a while. Everyone vaccinated. The youngest people there were, say, 18, 19, but everyone had been vaccinated up to my father-in-law, who's 81. So that was nice, and we sat there and had a fun evening, and some great food. And then Monday morning, my wife and I and my daughter and my niece went off up north, northern part of Israel, further north than where I am now, to the Carmel Forest Spa, which is a hotel up on a mountain. I think originally when it was built, it was a sanitarium, and was converted to a sort of spa hotel several years ago, and we've been going. I've been going over a number of years. It was my late father's favourite place to come and stay, and my mother also, obviously. Now, when my mum comes to visit us in Israel, we always try and get a night or two there all together, because we like it, and my wife and I have become very fond of staying there, and it's just a very peaceful, tranquil place. And I took some video to try and give you. I didn't take video walking around the hotel or the food, but I'll tell you a little bit about that. But what I'll do is I'll put in here the video of outside our bedroom. So this is, we took a room with that's on a sort of terrace. So it's not really a balcony, but it's a whole shared terrace. And I will put that video in now. And we're back. And so tell you, so we got to the hotel. Everyone, in order to come into the car park, we all had to show our green passports. So we'd all been vaccinated. My wife was struggling to find hers, and it was on her phone, but she dropped the phone down the side of the car in the journey up. So we eventually got through that, and she showed her green passport, and we all showed ours, and we were allowed in. And it's just, I've got it. I can even show you. Here's a good idea. I'll show you while I'm doing this. I'll pull it up and show you what it looks like. I have an app on my phone. So it's connected with my Israeli ID number. Everyone in Israel has an ID number. Everyone has to carry, by law, you have to carry your ID card with you wherever you go. So I know a lot of these things are causing people in other countries anxiety about, we're being watched and we're being made to carry things and IDs. And I've even heard ridiculous and frankly offensive comparisons of carrying some kind of a proof of vaccination with wearing a yellow star in Nazi Germany. That's kind of pretty revolting comparison. But essentially this is what it looks like. My green pass. Basically, it's, it doesn't even have anything. It's, please issue a pass. I've been vaccinated. Well, it's just an app, and it's just a picture of things saying that I've been vaccinated. And I showed this, and this was the thing, and it says, in Israel, people in Israel, I'll give some stats here, 5,244,481 people have been vaccinated in Israel out of a population of about 9 million. So that's pretty good. So it was a nothing, just to show an image of that to the guard at the gate. After that, no one ever asked again. We checked in all the public areas of the hotel. We wore masks, obviously not in our bedrooms. Obviously, when you went into the dining room, there was a buffet. And on the first night only, for some reason, the first night they gave everyone gloves, disposable gloves, but after that they didn't bother with that for the buffet. But see, we wore a mask when we went up to get food, and then we sit down at your table, you eat, take your mask off and you eat. In our bedrooms we didn't have masks on. When I was sitting around the pool, I didn't put my mask on, but to get up and go to the bathroom or order a drink or something, you would put the mask back on. But it was fairly, it's unobtrusive as far as I'm concerned. It's something we're just getting used to, and I think it's something we're going to be used to for a while. So that's a little bit about the stay in the hotel. And I spent most of it by the pool. I didn't do as much reading as I have done on previous days. I think we're doing a lot of chilling. It's been a busy few weeks, and so really use this as some downtime. So I'll talk about the reading I've done since my last check-in, and some of which was done in the spa. The book that I was reading, I think, when in my last Friday reads I just started, was Olive Again by Elizabeth Strout. I keep calling her Elizabeth Short. She's not. She's Elizabeth Strout. Elizabeth Short is someone else entirely who ended up dismembered, I believe. Olive Again is a sequel to Olive Kitteridge, which won the Pulitzer Prize a few years ago, and I very much enjoyed Olive Kitteridge. I haven't watched was it a movie or a mini-series with Frances McDormand? I didn't watch it because if I've had a good experience with the book, I rarely feel the need to see whatever live-action version of it they make. And I picked this up in a book hall in a charity shop here in my local town because I hadn't been super interesting. It wasn't like high on my priority list, but as I was running out of books, I found this, I picked it up, and it was terrific. Olive is all about loneliness and growing old, and I guess I'm probably 8-10 years older than I was when I read Olive Kitteridge, and my kids are older, and a couple of them have kind of left home. I'm not. And this book, I think Olive goes from 70 odd till 80s, so I'm not that old, but I'm older than I was previously, and becoming less relevant to the rest of my family. This is about loneliness and growing old, and it's beautifully written. I think after Olive Kitteridge, the only other Elizabeth Strout book I read was is it My Name is Lucy Barton? It's a very slim book, but I didn't get much out of that at all. I'm pleased to say this gave me everything that I got from Olive Kitteridge. It's beautiful and it's gentle. Essentially, it's marketed as a novel, as Olive Kitteridge was, but it is not. It's a collection of interconnected short stories, and I have no problem with short stories. I understand why they market it as a novel, because people don't buy short stories. I do buy short stories and short story collections and read short story collections, and I read in unrelated short story collections and interconnected short story collections. This is a short story collection of interconnected stories. So Olive moves in and out of this. Some of them are very specifically about Olive, and some of them about other people. And Olive sort of wanders, does a sort of cameo drive by, and she's always described as waving goodbye with her hand over her head. So she shows up even though if they're not, or if the story itself is not specifically about Olive. Quite lovely. I would definitely recommend this to people who enjoyed Olive Kittredge. If you haven't read Olive Kittredge, would you read this? No, if you haven't read Olive Kittredge, I would suggest read Olive Kittredge and then come and read this. It's more of the same, and that was perfectly welcome. And after that, I read Look Back in Anger by John Osborne. And I believe I read this play in school, although I couldn't remember much about it, and I wouldn't have been able to tell you the plot, if this could be described as having a plot. It's about a character called Jimmy Porter and his wife Alison and their lodger Cliff, and the interaction, and it's just dialogue between these characters and the interplay between them. And Jimmy Porter is a very angry young man, and this gave rise to an era where British playwrights, this is produced in 1956, so the British playwrights, the late 50s and early 60s, there was a group of them called the Angry Young Men, as this was led to this was part of a whole revival of British theatre, and Jimmy Porter is the archetypal angry young man, and he's also very lonely and sad. His anger comes from his sadness and his inability to channel how lonely he feels in the world in any way other than this absolute venom with which he attacks everything and everyone around him. And a lot of that is focused on his wife, Alison, and her parents, who never liked Jimmy and never wanted their daughter to marry him. Some of it spills over onto his friend Cliff, and he alienates the people around him, and things ensue. And I won't spoil it. I was struck by the end. I'd forgotten, you think of Jimmy Porter as being angry. You forget how sad he is. And it really is a deep, marrow-deep sadness that he has in this time. This is post-war. This is published in 1956. It's 10 years after the war. And the young men of Britain had no idea what their place was going to be if they hadn't fought in the war. This is if he's in his mid-20s in 1956, then he's missed that chance of heroism or adventure or whatever the war meant to the half generation ahead of him. And the world is changing, and he's unsure of his place, unsure who he wants to be, how he's going to live his life. And the frustration and the anger and the loneliness and the sadness that pours out of this autodidact, this self-taught, want-to-be intellect, but actually aspiring intellect, and someone who's becoming an intellect, grappling with the world and his place in it. I found this, I think, more affecting than I thought it was going to be. And I'm pleased I got to revisit it. That's Look Back in Anger by John Osborne, a fine piece of work. And after that, I started reading Gilead. And what I'll do is I'll put in so I read a bit of this before we went away, and then carried on reading it at around the pool, as I will now display. So I read Gilead, and previously I had read Housekeeping by Marilyn Robinson, which was the first book she published in 1980. and she didn't publish another book for 24 years. Gilead came out in 2004 and won lots of prizes. So I'd read Housekeeping actually round the pool in a different hotel on a previous holiday many years ago, and I really struggled with it. It's like a short novel, 200 pages, but I found it very dense, and so I'd put off reading more Marilyn Robinson, but she is so well loved and so worshipped in some cases. I've seen a huge amount of love for Marilyn Robinson, and so I felt like I wanted to give her another chance. Picked this up in the charity store and decided to give it a go. I try not to do too much plot when I talk about books, but Gilead is about the Reverend John Ames, who is in his 70s. It's set in 1956, and he is writing a letter to his young son. So he is remarried later in life and had one child who may be 7, 8, 9 years old at this stage while he's in his 70s with failing health. And he writes along, the whole book is the letter to his son, talking about what he wants for his son. He talks about his own life, and he remembers his grandfather and his father before him, who were also preachers and tenders to spiritual flocks. So he talks about himself and what he wants for his wife, who's younger than him, and then his young son. Also in this book, one of the key relationships in the book is John Ames's relationship with his godson, I think, if that's the right term. So John Ames has a friend who is also a preacher, and his name is Reverend Boughton, Boughton. I don't know, Boughton. And one of his sons, or his only son, is given the same name. He, in love of his friend, Boughton calls his son John Ames Boughton, who is very early on is remembered as a troubled child who gets into all sorts of trouble and mischief, and eventually leaves the town of Gilead where the whole thing is set. And he comes back many years later, and there's been some scandal and there's been some shame, and he comes back because his father, the Reverend Boughton, is unwell, and he comes to see him. And the relationship between John Ames and his namesake, John Ames Boughton, is at the heart of this, and it's a kind of father-son relationship, the whole of Gilead is about fathers and sons. So he's writing to his young son and talking about his troubled relationship with this godson who comes to talk to him and has fallen away from religion, but he has lots of questions about his life as a sinner and redemption, and can people change, and predestination. And there is a fair bit of sort of theological chat about this kind of stuff, none of which really scratched any deep itch for me, and I wonder why. And I know that people are not, people who love this book are not necessarily people of deep religious belief, but I think one of the things they're responding to is the gentle Christian heartfelt love and wrestling with the relationship with God that is portrayed here. It's not an evangelical book by any stretch, but it is a book about faith and losing faith and also maintaining faith. I wonder whether some of the reason why it didn't really hit home with me is because I don't know if I've had some of these conversations and deliberations and I spent time in a religious seminary when I was 18, 19 years old and studied religious philosophy and spent some time having the kind of theological arguments and discussions with friends that you have when you're an earnest young man wrestling with faith. So I don't think any of this was particularly new or revelatory to me. I found it a little, what's the French word, jeune, but maybe I don't know if that's just my reaction to it. But the stuff about parenting and being a father and the disappointment of children in their parents and parents in their children, and the overcoming of that and the expressing of love and the difficulty of really managing that relationship and understanding as a parent the love that you have for a child, and understanding as a child that the unconditional love that a parent has. I find that quite moving. And there's a passage right at the end of the book which was I found very moving. So John Ames Boughton has come back to see his father, and the whole time has kind of been not arguing, but there's been some back and forth banter between the young man, this prodigal son who has returned, who is still living a problematic life, and John Ames. At the end, when John Ames Boughton, the young man, is leaving, John Ames finds him at the bus stop and offers to give him a blessing. And it's... what would that involve? Well, as I envisage it, it would involve my placing my hand on your brow and asking the protection of God for you. But if it would be embarrassing, there are a few people in the street. No, he said, that doesn't matter. And he took his hat off and set it on his knee and closed his eyes and lowered his head, almost rested it against my hand, and I did bless him to the limit of my powers, whatever they are, repeating the benediction from Numbers, of course. The Lord make his face to shine upon thee, and be gracious unto thee. The Lord lift up his countenance upon thee, and give thee peace. And it's a famous paragraph from Numbers, and is a blessing that is often given by fathers to sons. It was the blessing that my father would give me when he saw me, and it is the same blessing that I give to each of my children every single Friday night when they're here, and it ends, "I'd give thee peace, v'yasem lecha shalom." So that was kind of moving to me, because not in the book it's moving because this is an atheist or someone struggling with faith receiving the benediction of a man of faith. But in my life, it's something that we do every week and is part of our tradition, not because we're wrapped up or struggling with faith, but it's just, I think, a nice kind of blessing to give. Nice thing to do is to bless one's children and hug them and love them, and I think that's the best part of Gilead. So that was Gilead, and then I finished Gilead and moved on to my next book. And that's The Incredulity of Father Brown. And this is my first G.K. Chesterton. This was this beautiful Penguin book that I picked up very cheaply in the charity store. And this is short stories. This is from 1926, so this is post Conan Doyle. And actually, at least this was the third collection of Father Brown. So I'm not going to the beginning of Father Brown, which I haven't read. This is my first meeting with Father Brown, and he's been around a while, and so I felt like a bit that I was coming in the middle, even though it doesn't really matter, I guess, what order you read these in. But he actually name checks Sherlock Holmes early on in a couple of the stories at least, and the first story is even kind of a homage. He talks about Conan Doyle killing off Holmes at the Rickenback Falls or whatever it is. I haven't read all the Sherlock Holmes, and I haven't got to that story yet, so I know that's coming up. And the first story in this is called The Resurrection of Father Brown, I believe. Yes, and there's some weird. This didn't blow me away, and I'll tell you for why. I've read some Sherlock Holmes. I've read about Raffles, so I'm not completely, this early 20th century era of British crime fiction is not totally alien to me. I'm probably much more familiar with the later noir fiction and the pulp American stuff. So Hammett and Chandler and James Cain are really what brought me to crime fiction. But I've dabbled in British stuff. But what I felt here that we don't get enough of. We don't get a whole lot of, and certainly not enough of Father Brown himself. In each story, there's a pattern where there's a setup and something's happened, and we introduced a bunch of characters, and then wanders into scene a scruffy old man who we term as a priest, and we realise very quickly that it's Father Brown. So none of the stories are from his point of view. He sort of he enters the often the crime scene, or sometimes before the crime scene, and he's a sort of a peripheral character who then through some wisdom and sometimes cynicism solves whatever, explains whatever happened. There was a lot of similarity here, so there's often this everyone else is thinking, oh, there's some kind of supernatural element, and how did this possibly happen? And it was a locked room, and how could the bow and arrow have been fired up 3 flights and got him through the window and killed him, and stuff like that. There's a lot of and those kind of classic mysteries, and while everyone else thinks there's some kind of supernatural element to it, Father Brown, the spiritual man of God, debunks it and explains, no, that isn't what happened. The arrow wasn't fired in through the window. He was stabbed with an arrow, and only because you thought arrows have to be fired from bow and arrow, but actually he was killed. That kind of stuff. I didn't find it terribly convincing. Also, in each case, the puzzle is solved not with everybody in the room, one of you is the murderer, and then it's none of that. It's often 2 or 3 weeks later, Father Brown is sitting in his chair having a conversation with someone, and that's when I knew it was that guy who did it, and really, and we'll never see justice. And it was a little unsatisfying. Each story, it was a little unsatisfying in how they were solved. Maybe I'll read more Father Brown. Maybe I'll go back to the beginning and read his earlier stories and see if we can get a bit more of his personality. He doesn't have the quirks that a Poirot has, or Sherlock Holmes, or even a Raffles. So wasn't blown away by it, but fun enough. And there were 8 stories here, each one about 25 pages, so easily digestible and a good read round the pool. So I finished that and started my next book, which I'm going to finish this weekend. So my next book is The City of Mirrors by Justin Cronin, which is the 3rd in a trilogy. Started with The Passage, which I bought cheaply in a beautiful hardback edition. Like really, this so new. This was £20. The first one, The Passage, I bought for something like £3.50 from I think Awesome Books, and it was a big chunky hardback. It's there it is, right there. That's The Passage. And then after that, there's the 12. And then I wanted the 3rd one, if I've already read these 2 in hardbacks. I got them both cheap, second-hand. And this one I couldn't find. And then I saw a friend of mine, I was out for lunch a couple of years ago, and she was reading this. And I sort of stared at it covetously and said, that's the actual edition that I've been trying to get. And she said, and she finished reading it and brought it round and donated it to the library here, because she has no need to keep books, and now I've got a matching set of these 3. One second, let's put them there. It will go there when this is done, and I'll tell you more about this when I've read it. And that's your lot. Thanks very much. Take care. Bye.